Debbie, you've been the heart and soul of Cathays Community Centre for over 30 years, running the inclusive youth provision, a service that is meant for young people with additional learning needs. And today we have such a wonderful chance to actually sit down and speak about your experiences and before you're gonna begin another exciting journey in your life. And as some of you may not know, Debbie is about to retire. And Debbie, before we actually are going to dive into your memories with inclusive youth provision, let's start by talking more generally about youth work. And you've been so passionate about youth work all your life. So maybe you can tell us what inspired you to study youth work and pursue with this career.
Well, Helena, I never had a grand plan. It all just happened, really. When you say all my life I've been a youth worker, that has been the last 30 years. So until the age of 35, I wasn't involved in youth work. So effectively, I came to it quite late. My introduction to youth work was here at Cathays Community Centre, where my son, who was 10 at the time, he's coming up to 42 now, and he was in a band here at Cathays. And he used to walk back and forth from the house carrying his bass guitar. And I was a bit worried he might get mugged or somebody take the guitar from him. So I used to walk with him and hang around when he was in band practice. And then just saw all the great stuff that was going on and got quite friendly with the then manager, John Wilson, and originally got involved with the music project that my son was. He was actually in the first band to rehearse here at Cathays, and the project grew, and then it turned into a youth music project. I got involved by volunteering at the Open Access Youth Club. There was no inclusive youth provision here at the time. So I volunteered in the youth club and also got a job as the cleaner here and used to, spend quite a lot of time actually buffing the wooden floor. It was a beautiful blockwood floor. I found it very soothing doing cleaning that floor with the buffing machine, and thinking then, I had 3 children at that point who would have been 16, 14 and 11, I think, something like that. So they were growing up, and I thought, youth work, I'm enjoying coming here. This may be something I could start a career in, because up until that point, having had my children young, I hadn't really had any sort of career.
But like young people with additional learning needs, how come?
Well, we had 2 or 3 young people who came to the Open Access Youth Club who did have additional learning needs. We used to say back in those days, we'd say they had learning disabilities. The terminology has changed. And they enjoyed coming to youth club, but they weren't entirely safe in an open access provision. And we had an incident where one of the young people, who actually still comes here, he's coming up to 40 now, I believe. But back in the 1990s, he was in youth club, perhaps 14 years old. And he left the youth club with some of the friends that he had made. And there was a bit of a fright. He was soon found. But I had the feeling he was pretty much told he wouldn't be able to come back because we couldn't guarantee his safety. So I felt, well, it's really not entirely fair that people with learning difficulties are excluded from the activities that their peers can get involved with. So I looked at getting some funding to run a closed access youth club on a Friday where the young people weren't able to come and go freely. We had a duty of care to be responsible for them for that 3 hours, which reassured their parents and kept them safe. From that, I got some funding from BBC Children in Need to run a 1-week holiday provision for teenagers, and that there were so many people who wanted to come. The Friday night provision at that point was having 30 or 40 turning up. And so we thought, well, 1 week for 12 people isn't enough. And I went in for a bigger funding bid and support from social services and youth services to run a 4-week summer holiday provision, which I think would have been around about 2005. Mm-hmm. And it all grew from there. It was just so clear there was a need for youth provision in Cardiff for young people with additional learning needs.
Do you remember how many people attended when you started with it? And
well, it was very different to how it is now, because it was more youth work based. So we could only accept referrals for young people with what we would have said they're mild to moderate learning needs. And we had a ratio of 5 young people to each staff member. So looking back, I would think we maybe had about 25 young people each day. And as well as having youth staff who would support the group to get involved with activities, we would get funding to run arts-based projects, sports projects. So we'd have leaders coming in. We also had funding to run 2 minibuses. So, yeah, it may have been even more than 25. It's hard to remember. But we certainly couldn't accommodate the number of referrals that we were having. I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Did you also study youth work? As far as I know, you studied youth work, and IYP was part of your uni work. Am I right?
Absolutely. Again, for me, there was never a grand plan. And through working here, I used to support a young woman whose name was Lubna. She was a wheelchair user, and I used to take her out on weekends through what were then, let's call it direct payments. She had her own money to employ someone. And her social worker rang me one day and asked if I'd be interested in supporting a young person who was going to attend UWIC, as it was then, which is now Cardiff Met. They were the first wheelchair user to attend Cardiff Met, or UWIC, sorry. And they wanted somebody who'd had experience of working with people with cerebral palsy to support them around the campus. So that was my introduction to university life. And I supported this person right through their degree. And through doing that, I thought, well, I could be doing this myself. I came out of school with no qualifications, literally no qualifications. Had children very young, so I never, ever thought of myself as someone who would go to university. But having been introduced to university life, I thought, well, why not?
Did you have any particular dreams who you wanted to become?
when I was young, I was quite a rebel. I didn't like rules and regulations. I didn't really. The people who I admired were people like Bonnie and Clyde, Ned Kelly, the outlaws and the rebels. Those were the sort of folk heroes, the anti-establishment people, Che Guevara, people like that. I didn't really, know the ins and outs of these people, because it sounds like I'm talking about a lot of murdering thieves. But I was very much a rebel when I was young. So I would say if there was a real hero, it would maybe be Che Guevara. I liked his left-wing ideals and the idea of completely turning over society and revolution. But having children at 18, I didn't have much time for revolutions or politics even. So when I started in university, then I really started reading, and I would say at that point that the one philosopher, community educator, if you like, that really impressed me was Saul Alinsky. I'm not entirely sure of the pronunciation. Some people say Saul and Alinsky, but Saul Alinsky, who was a community activist, but I liked his style. He wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. I think it's a pragmatic primer for people who want to change the world, something like that. Can't exactly remember, but I read a lot of Saul Alinsky, and I think if he was the person that I admired the most, as I saw as my role model once I'd started my education.
Mm-hmm. You told me as well that you told me about your rebellious personality, but you said that something changed when you had your first child, and you actually really, really started liking this role, and you have now 3 children.
Yes.
So
I loved having children. I think looking back, that's perhaps my happiest time of my life, was when the children were small. I really, really enjoyed it. I think as a child, I was adopted. I had found my family, but they lived in Australia. As a child, I moved around a lot, not in foster homes or anything, but I was adopted, and the adoptive family moved a lot. And I just loved settling down, having my own house. We did buy a house, even though I was 18 when we got married. We were able to buy a house in those days, something that was possible on a fireman's wage. So we did. I don't know if it would be described as habitable in these days, the house we lived in. But having the house and the children, it was a nice little community, Lanishan Street we lived. So that I really, really enjoyed family life. And my house was always open house to the street. It was always full of children. And then as the children got older, it was full of teenagers. Saturday nights at my house, it was always full of young people, which I guess led me into youth work in a way, because I was very comfortable around teenagers and young people. And also I was never particularly judgmental. If things happened, I'd always look for the reason behind it. So, yeah, I'd said earlier I didn't have a grand plan, but even talking now, I can see the thread.
Yes, that's what I was thinking as well, that maybe these sort of experiences, led you to youth work.
So to feeling comfortable in that role, yes, yeah.
But then now you're also surrounded by young people all the time on a daily basis, and you've been running the IYP Inclusive Youth Provision for a very long time. There must be some like unforgettable memories. Maybe you would like to share some of those with us.
Yeah, you mentioned this to me earlier, Helena, and it really got me thinking about unforgettable memories. And I think the most vivid memory I have, which I could perhaps relive second by second, is on a barge trip that we went on. I guess it was about 20 years ago now. And we had hired a barge specifically for for the group. We took a group of 6 young people, myself, John Wilson, and Tony Clark. Both of them have passed away now. But we hired a barge which was extra wide to accommodate a wheelchair user. So off we went. We had 1 wheelchair user, 3 youth workers, 5 young people, I think. Wonderful trip. Barge trips are just amazing because you have to work together to open and shut the locks. You know, there's work involved. You're living in very close proximity, but you do stop off and visit Bristol, Bath, things like that. So it's a great experience. It can go wrong, as I will tell you now, but it's a good bonding experience for the young people, and it's fun for the staff. So anyway, I'll never forget, a Greenham Lock we came to, and I did sort of notice that the side of the lock at parts was crumbling, and it had been sort of shored up with metal sheeting. So I noticed it, but didn't think much. So we'd had a lot of getting on and off the barge for opening and shutting locks. And the young man in the wheelchair, or the wheelchair user, pardon me, had felt he didn't want to get up. It was a struggle for him to get up the steps onto the deck, across a plank, onto the bank. So he and I decided to stay below deck. So they opened the lock, and you can feel the barge starts to go down because the water level changes. So I could feel this, and then I noticed that things started to slide off the table. Then I noticed that plates that were on shelves started cascading down, and I stood up and realised that the barge, instead of the floor being flat, was now at quite an angle. So I went and shouted, something's wrong. And what had happened, because the barge was extra wide, it had caught on this metal sheeting that was holding the sides of the barge up. So I went back in, and the lad in the wheelchair, or the wheelchair user, so sorry, was really getting upset and panicking now. So I tried to help him up the steps, but we couldn't get up the steps. So what was the likelihood of the next thing to happen was that the barge would be completely vertical, and then it would flip, and he and I would be underneath the barge in the canal. Thankfully, one of our group had the sense to see what was happening just in time, got some of them to shut the lock gate that was opened, and ran and opened the other lock gate to raise the water level back up. And suddenly I thought, we're coming up flat again. And we levelled off, and we were both lying on the deck, just terrified, absolutely terrified. And the person who had the sense to change the lock gates was an 11-year-old Joel Beswick, who is now a 31-year-old, 32, I'm not sure, centre manager. So thank you. I will say that Joel did save my life. Just to finish off that story, when I eventually felt that I could sit up and get my breath, another of the group came running to me saying, "Debbie, I've got you some brandy for shock." And I thought, well, goodness knows where he's got brandy from, but I'll take it. And took a great big gulp of olive oil.
Unbelievable.
He had mistaken a bottle of olive oil for a bottle of brandy. So we did find it hilarious. So we were all of us, we did, it lightened the mood, shall we say.
Definitely.
And certainly we had to come back through Greenham Lock, and we all got off and walked for the return journey.
Okay, so any other funny stories that come to your mind when you think about the community centre?
Well, Helene, there are so many, but another one that I think I will never forget was we'd taken a group up to London, a small group of young people, just for the day, I believe, and we were going to the Winter Wonderland in Hyde Park, really not realising what a crowded, busy place Winter Wonderland in Hyde Park was going to be. We travelled up and met a young person, Katharina, or she's actually saying that she'd have been 30-ish by then. And she used to attend here many years ago, but moved to London. So we took a group up for the day, myself and Tom Large. We met with Katharina, and she was coming back to stay with me for Christmas. So the day was quite stressful because one of our group, Dominic, he did not want to go home again, and he was determined to lose us and at some point and stay in London. So we had to be extra vigilant. We finished off the day at Hyde Park and it nearly came to an end. We were ready to go to catch the train back when Dominic realised this was his last chance. And he bolted from us. Tom, the person I was working with, a very fast runner, bolted after him. But Dominic ran straight past the ride attendants and into the fun house. Disappeared up a wonky ladder and into the fun house. He went in very quickly, but Tom wasn't so fast and got stopped by the ride attendant, who spoke Romanian, and Tom, not speaking a word of Romanian, was trying to explain to him that there was a young Polish boy with autism had run into the fun house, and Tom had to go and find him. In the end, Tom paid to go on. Tom had his phone. I stood in front of the fun house watching Dominic going up and down ladders, back and forth across cakewalks, down the slide, peering at windows, shouting to Tom, "He's gone up the ladder. He's come down the slide. He's in the water spray bit. He's in the hamster wheel." As Tom chased him around the fun house. Finally, Dominic stayed in one place, the top floor window at the right-hand side. I have a photograph of it, of him peeping through the window, and I managed to guide Tom to him, and Dominic had had his fun and happily came out and caught the train home. But it was like a Laurel and Hardy sketch to see the two of them running round the fun house with me shouting directions. And again, there's a bit more to that story. Katharina, who was coming to stay with me, was complaining that she didn't feel too good. And well, never mind, you'll have a few days, Christmas time now to, we'll pamper you, we'll look after you. She'd been living on her own in a flat for a while. But when we returned to my house the next morning, I thought, ooh, she's very round the middle. Took her to A&E, and she was 26 weeks pregnant without knowing that she was pregnant at all. So it was quite a day. It all ended happily. She had a beautiful baby boy who's now 7. And with the help of her family, he's doing really well. And it all had a happy ending. But it was certainly a trip to London that I will never forget.
Unbelievable memories. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Yes, what a journey.
I should write a book, I think.
Yeah, but then thinking about your experiences and also like these unforgettable moments, what do you think? What have been the biggest challenges that you faced in your career?
Oh gosh, biggest challenges. In more recent years, definitely sustainability and funding. In the early years, through the late 90s, 2000s, there was much more money around. People with, as we would have said, mild learning disabilities got a good service. They would have a case manager, regular respite. People, there was a lot more service for people around. The money was coming to us as well. We were able to get big grant social services, and the youth service would top up the funding. And as I said earlier, when we started off, we could hire 2 minibuses. We could bring in outside workers. As time has gone on, not only is there less funding coming for our provisions, we have to much more have an eye on the person, spend a lot less. We haven't got money for hiring minibuses or, all those, what seems like luxuries now. But even more so for people with additional learning needs, there are so few services. In fact, to actually get a service, to get a social worker now, you have to meet a high criteria. And I just see a lot of families in crisis at the moment. And I understand that, it must be a hell of a job being a social worker, because the services are so underfunded. That's what I would say is the biggest challenge. It's upsetting and stressful to know the struggles that people are going through. I've just had to write an email this morning highlighting all the problems, the deficits, the challenges that a family are having, so that they just get a bit more of a service, because I know that family are in absolute crisis, and yet their services are being reduced rather than increased. And that is a big challenge.
Yeah, it is definitely very, very difficult.
Also, I think for professionals, the role is so stressful. You can't help but get involved with families. And I'm talking more for social workers here now. And there's a lot of movement, people moving out of the jobs, because it is very, very stressful constantly having to say no to people.
But how have you seen the needs or challenges of young people change over the 30 years you've been working? Have you noticed something?
Big change, particularly since the pandemic. I'm not sure. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't. I can only say what I've read, and my feeling is, backed up a bit by what I've read, that the pandemic plus the massive increase of use of social media has had devastating effect on young people's mental health. And for the last few years, the big change I've seen is young people with anxieties, diagnosis, ADHD, ASD. There's a theory that ASD was underdiagnosed in the past, that it hasn't actually increased. It's being more diagnosed. But I don't feel that, or unless COVID was a catalyst to people who may have had the vulnerability to neurodiversities, that it's been a trigger. I really don't know. But that's the huge change I'd see, is the mental health of young people and the anxiety coming out of things like self-harming, non-school attendance, suicidal ideations. This is something that is far more prevalent.
Yes, the things have changed a lot, and definitely the pandemic was also like a very big thing that affected all of us, I guess.
Yeah, I think young adolescents, in my experience, and I'll say this again, in my experience, I feel that was the age group that it affected the most. And my own little theory is that from the age of 10, 11, 12, children aren't physically developing, but they're starting, well, they are to an extent, but they haven't hit the big adolescence development. But they're starting to break away from home a bit, allowed to go into town on their own, go out with their friends, stay out a bit later. And I think that the sort of 10 and 11-year-olds came out of the pandemic without learning those, let's say, breakaway skills, independent skills. They were coming out at 13, 14 and hadn't had that, and then hitting adolescence. That's my own little theory.
Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing.
But that's an age group, and having 3 15-year-olds, 13-year-old, 12-year-old grandchildren, all of that age, they do seem to be the ones who've been affected more than the older or younger ones.
I'm glad actually that you started speaking about your grandchildren and your family, because my next question was going to be about it. So your family history is also quite fascinating, and you have 3 children, and did you say 10 grandchildren?
10 grandchildren.
And they are all, or a lot of them are also involved in the centre's activities.
Yes, yeah.
How did that come about, and how do you feel like seeing them continuing with all this?
Oh, well, Ella is the eldest grandchild. She's 28, I believe, and the youngest is 10. And then there's a cluster around mid-teens. I think all of my grandchildren have just loved the fact that Nanny works at the centre, because they've been able to join in with all the fun activities that go on. We've had birthday parties here. For 3 or 4 years, we had our Christmas dinners here because we could get the whole family in the kitchen, and then friends and relations would sort of join. So the centre has been a massive part of all of their lives. The older ones have all volunteered, and 3 or 4, I lose track, sorry, have worked here in paid employment as youth support workers, and used it, like so many other people, as a springboard into other employment. Ella's a teacher in Cantonian High School. Olivia's a teaching assistant and going in for, I think, speech and language therapy. Amelia, and Pearl, Amelia and Pearl, I know there was 4. They've all worked, and it's built their confidence and been good for their CV. And they've never got away with the easy road, because Nanny's the boss type of thing. I've always made sure that they pull their weight, and sometimes have the more tricky jobs to do. So I didn't ever want to be accused of favouritism.
What are you going to miss the most about working here and being a part of the community?
Dear. The power, I think. No. It's going to be strange going from being a manager to not. It is. Let's say influence. I hate the word power. I was being ironic. Then I was using that word ironically. It's the influence and being able to have an element of realising ideas and things. I will continue coming here as a service user. I intend coming to every event, coming to coffee morning. Maybe not quite yet memory lane, but I've got it marked down for later years. And for social activities. But I guess I will find it odd to come in and not have the influence that I have at the moment. In another way, that'll be a big relief as well, not to have the responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Looking back over your 30 years of caring for young people, how do you feel you made a difference in their lives? Is there a moment that you are particularly proud of?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, I'd pick you up, and I know you're saying it in perhaps a different context, but I would say supporting rather than caring, although I care a lot, but that's something we often say, we're not care workers, we use support workers. And the difference, I think, with youth and community work is we want to empower young people to reach their potential. So that is the aim. We do care, but we wouldn't describe ourselves as carers, youth workers. I've been proud and thrilled by so many young people to see the journey that they've come through. And I think the ones that really fill my heart with joy is young people, and there are a few of them over the years who have started as members. They may have had a diagnosis of neurodiversity or a mild learning difficulty. They've started as members, they've become volunteers and have gone on to employment within the centre and then on to further employment. And I'm going to mention one young person who's on our staff team now, Max, Spain. He came along as a member originally. I think the family had recently moved to Cardiff. Max won't mind me saying he has a diagnosis of autism. He went to the unit at Cathays High School. He then started to volunteer, and he's now on the payroll. And he is such an asset to have on the team, because there's been a few times when he's articulated the actual lived experience of having autism and explained why he thinks maybe some of the young people behave as they do, or how he would feel in that situation. And I think, if there's been many a young person have had a journey that I think they wouldn't have had if they hadn't got involved. But Max is now, I believe, going to college. He's musically, he's doing really well. He's talented. He started here playing the drums and in a band. I saw some film of him the other day. Must be 10 years old now, when he was first year in the band. And I guess he's someone that I've maintained contact with for a long time. And very, very proud. So I think, Max, I think, stands out as a great example of attending Cathays IYP, where it can lead to.
Fantastic. But in your opinion as well, Debbie, what do you think? What are the essential skills for someone to be a great youth worker, or what sort of advice would you like to give for those that would like to become youth workers?
I think to be a youth worker, it's something you you have to want to do that. I think some people, they may want to go in for teaching, may not get the grades or whatever, and think, oh, I'll try youth work instead. It is specific. It's different. There are many ways of working with young people, but youth work is quite specific. I think the first thing is you have to enjoy being around young people. We have a very big staff team now in IYP because a lot of our members need one-to-one support. And the vast majority of our staff love coming to work. They enjoy the role. They have fun. There have been one or two people who you think you don't really want to be here. You might as well be working in Tesco or doing something different. You're not actually enjoying being around young people. If you don't enjoy it, you're not likely to be any good. The other thing is, I think, is to understand the value base, that it's about, when the word empower means to give somebody power. So you don't hold the car. You're not it's not like the teacher-pupil relationship. It's a partnership with that young person, and you may learn as much from them as they learn from you. As a youth worker, you have to be able to step back and let the young people make mistakes, learn from their mistakes. It's not about where you get to at the end. It's very much about the journey and reaching the goal and allowing young people to take control and have the power.
Mm-hmm. And how have you planned to spend your retirement, Debbie?
Oh, well, I have a caravan at the Gower, which I intend spending a lot more time with my husband and my little white dog, and the 10 grandchildren and three children. I'm sure there'll be lots of visits back and forth. But my big plan is to go travelling with the Farrell sisters. 3 of my older grandchildren. We're going to visit my sister in Australia, but take in Tokyo on the way out and Singapore on the way back. So I've essentially worked an extra year, really, to pay for this trip. So, that's my big goal. I haven't seen my sister for about 10 years now. So we'll be staying in Melbourne, Adelaide, travelling around Australia. So, yeah, that's my first goal. And then see where life takes me.
That sounds so exciting. And I know we were discussing earlier, like you've been telling me that I need to write a book. And now I was thinking that I can ask you that if you'd ever write the book, then how would you call it?
What would I call it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I think all the good titles have been taken, haven't they? Oh gosh. I really can't. What would I call it? Cathays Days, maybe.
Fantastic.
Days at Cathays. That's got a ring to it, isn't it?
Days at Cathays.
Yes.
Sounds really good. Excellent. And I don't know, Debbie, is there something else that you'd like to tell us? Is there anything that you'd want to say to your fans?
Oh my goodness.
There are many of them.
Well, I don't know about fans, but I'd just like to say that I've met so many wonderful and fantastic people during my 30 years here. Hundreds, probably thousands, I would imagine, because we have, on any day we've got 50 or 60 people passing through the doors at least. 30 years of youth work. The early cohort would all be in their 40s now, so there are probably, I would think, thousands of you out there. So thank you all for making my life at Cathays so fun, eventful and memorable. And much love to anybody who feels like spending time watching this interview. Thank you, Helena.
Thank you, Debbie. And I can definitely say on behalf of all of us, it's been so lovely working with you, and thank you for your dedication, and have a lovely retirement. Enjoy.
Oh, thank you, Helena, and thank you, James.